this is a clip that you've got to watch. Chris Cuomo reacts to the killing of 6 hostages imprisoned, abused inside of Gaza, and the reaction or lack of reaction from the world, and the perverse pointing of the finger at Netanyahu. For those who are in some kind of alternative reality to think that he was able to somehow stop this, Hamas were not coming to the table. Not that Israel should be doing deals with Hamas. But anyway, I want you to watch what Chris Cuomo, who has seemingly become a bit of an unlikely or surprising friend of and supporter of Israel in these times. Have a watch of what he says.
I'll be honest with you. I'm not really sure what to say. And that had me laboring all Labor Day weekend. How can it be hard to discuss why the murder of 6 Israeli and American hostages matters? 6 young people stolen from the Nova Music Festival by Hamas on October 7th. Then, just as the IDF was close to rescuing them after almost a year of searching, they were reportedly executed. And now I'm left with nothing but questions. But there are questions we all have to answer. The first one is, why don't these faces unify us? At least here at home. Carmel Gott, Eden Yerushalmi, Alexander Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, Master Sergeant Ori Danino. Young people that could have been part of the solution lost to the problem. And there's one face we know more about. Hersh Goldberg Poland, 23-year-old Israeli-American taken and now murdered along with the others. His smiley Punim has been the poster for the hostage crisis. I remember it when I first saw it all over his parents' house in Tel Aviv just after October 7th, when I was blown away by John and Rachel's love and commitment. Their hope and mine was that telling their story would help more connect to what is so wrong here, to what matters. Now I have to wonder, did I help anything at all? I wonder in part because of how this news has been received. First, why are all these lost souls merely called deaths? So many media accounts put it this way. Did they die in an accidental crash or from cancer in that tunnel? No, Hersh and the others were assassinated. Targeted murders performed by terrorists to remind that they want no one saved from them. A reaction was sent to me by a friend of Hersh's family, and they asked some hard questions. Listen to this. Before he was murdered by Hamas in those final moments, was he aware of his parents' anguished pleas, quite possibly at the same moment, broadcasting at the Gaza border another chilling plea for him to just survive? Did you hear Hersh's mother last Thursday?
Hersh! Hersh! It's Mama. I love you. Stay strong. Survive.
Was he able to hear that? Was he able to hear the footsteps of the battle-hardened Israeli soldiers who were finally closing in after almost a year of trying to save him? You can feel how you want about the Middle East. It's one of the longest-running conflicts in history. It's going nowhere. But Hamas will never be remembered as freedom fighters in any context except one. For them to be free, to carry out Iran's extreme Islamist wishes. They want Gazans free? Yeah. Only to follow their caveman ways or die. And for Jews to die no matter what, and for us to die as well. Here at home, some on campus and online boost the cause of terrorists who would gladly kill them. And no, Hamas wouldn't just torture those who identify with oppressed minorities, such as LGBTQ+, but all of the same people who paint their symbols and repeat their propaganda. Hamas and the other proxies of the poison regime in Iran want us all dead, period. What else do you need to see? They celebrated the evil murder of a young woman by releasing a video of Eden spouting propaganda. Why? Because they want you to know that her value was only as an echo of their animus. That is how they want her remembered. And too many here seem to agree. This idea that the real victims are elsewhere, in Gaza, and shame on us for giving all this attention to Hirsch and the others who had it coming. That idea has to be heard to be appreciated for its depravity. Listen to this anti-Israel protester in Manhattan caught on tape talking about Hirsch Goldberg.
Was executed yesterday by terrorists. Are you okay? He deserved it?
Sure.
Why is that?
What business does he have?
What business did he at a music festival dancing with his friends?
Israel killed him.
Israel killed him?
Not Hamas.
And you're supporting terrorists like that. You are.
Oh, it's only one. It's not just one. It's representative of a kind. And we know where they're getting it. Look at this Twitter thread that I found. So I'm looking for what's missing. Where's the discussion about the hostages and why this happened? So the only discussion on the thread, hostage murders, wasn't trending for its own importance. The theme was a headline that said, Israel did something bad. These are just nasty tweets. Get those off the screen. This was the headline in a discussion about the hostages being murdered. Where does this poisonous pursuit of parody end? Look, I get opposing the violence, the degree of death caused by Israel's retaliation, the occupation, the settlements, the lack of aid and media access. To want people in Gaza to be free and safe and determine their own fate. I'm here for all of it.
Not sure you should be here for all of it, but we'll deal with that later, because all those things he's listed, occupation, settlements, all those things, either they're not illegitimate things to do, Jews living in their ancient homeland, or things like occupation or security checkpoints, whatever, they only exist as part of Israel's need to ensure security for her own people. She's tried time and time again to do deals to create two states, all these things. So I don't have time for any of that stuff, but we'll park that, because largely what Chris is saying is right.
And present those arguments on the regular. But none of those desires will be met with Hamas terrorists in control. And no state would do much differently than Israel is right now if they shared a border with an organization pledged to their destruction. What I do not get is people saying, who cares about 6 versus 40,000 Gazans? This relativism, again, is poison. All 6 were stolen. We're innocent. You can't say that about all in Gaza. And the bigger problem is that but for these 6 and the others who were stolen as part of one of the worst massacres in Israeli history, you don't have the 40,000. Yes, there was trouble before October 7. Yes, that trouble has a degree of Israeli culpability. But this current violence is the consequence of one day and the actions of one group. And for the Israelis, these murders made deeper the festering wound opened on that day. I get protests of Netanyahu and those arguing he could have taken a deal that was rumored to potentially bring hostages home. Whether or not it was the right deal, these murders are an indictment of Bibi's decisions and desires. Yes, these murders rightly motivate the outrage there that Bibi and his far-right regime are feeding off this war to maintain power and do not reflect the Israeli people's appetite for this to end. But be clear, we are not a new prime minister in Israel away from peace, are we? Certainly not now. Here is what seems horrible but true.
And that, by the way, let's just, again, because this language I think is of far right and all that, you've got to be really careful with that. Netanyahu was clear. He had proposed all kinds of what the Americans call generous deals, even recently. Deals which, by the way, I'm not so sure that I feel comfortable with, because deals that could compromise Israel's future security or set a precedent that you take hostages and then we'll do a deal with you is extremely dangerous. But the notion that there was some kind of deal that he could have taken, he has made clear on the record just a few days ago, it wasn't there. So this notion that Israel could have accepted a deal is seems like it's just entirely false.
I don't believe there is any amount of suffering, any amount of death that would be enough to say enough. And the reason for that is now clear to me. Nothing can get better while we have a selective preference about who it's okay to kill. While we have different rationales for right and wrong depending on who dies. As long as some deaths move us in a way others don't, there will be nothing approaching peace there or here, by the way. Either it all matters or none of it matters. Either we all matter to one another or no one matters to anyone. The dead in Gaza matter. The 6 being murdered matter. Move to what we do to stop it rather than compare killings. And the reality hit me when Hirsch's father said what he said at Hirsch's funeral. We failed you, Hirsch. I had an instant rejection to that idea. He was wrong. John, I love you. You are wrong about you and your family. You have only succeeded, brother, in raising a beautiful kid who had the right things in his head and in his heart by you and Rachel being a lodestar for putting pain to a greater purpose. To show us we lost our grip on our collective respect for humanity. You are wrong about you, but you are right about many of us. We must make these murders matter. There is relatively way too much quiet about what happened. Let this be the catalyst that drives leaders to demand Hamas give the hostages back, American and others, and then you stop the fighting. No leader should be silent now. And we don't need to hear condolences and clawing nods to peace. What are they going to do to make it stop? Or do you just want to wait for it to be all the Americans are dead? Last point on what was lost. Often I hear that with every Gazan killed, Israel...
Before we hear that last point, I just want to say very simply that him saying, well, you know, we need to take our protest to Hamas and demand they return the hostages. They're not interested in any demands, no amount of pressure. This is a death cult that's prepared to destroy absolutely everything in the cause of killing Jews. So no, it's not that we should demand, it's that Israel should utterly decimate and destroy Hamas. And that's the only way that you win. The only way you have a chance of recovering the hostages, the only way you have a chance of putting pressure on them. No demand or anything like that's going to really do it. The only language they understand is strength.
Last point on what was lost. Often I hear that with every Gazan killed, Israel has new enemies because you have all the loved ones. But there's a much bigger price paid in the potential loss. The Gazans who could have driven Hamas out, who wanted a better life, free from that oppression. The Israelis who could bring better. This is the lesson of Hirsch for me. Did you see the reel of the family before Hirsch was taken? Maybe this is why it hit different. He wasn't just an innocent, not just proof of how evil October 7th was. As a friend of the family put it, somehow his survival represented a last strand of hope that something precious could be saved out of all this destruction. And not just because of how he was taken or murdered, but because of how he lived and what he wanted. Hirsch was only 23, an Israeli and an American, and a sympathizer with the plight of the Palestinians. He wanted to do the work to be a bridge. He was hope for a better future. So here is my Kaddish, my prayer for the dead. John, Rachel, Zikrono Livraho, may his memory be a blessing to you. To the families of Eden, Carmel, Alexander, Almog, Ori, Zikronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing to you. And to all of us, Baruch Dayan Hay Ahmet, blessed is the true judge. And the memories of the murdered should be a blessing to us all, allowing us to see the truth. They matter because all matter. Will you see what is happening all around us for what it is and for what must stop? You have to answer this question for yourself. Did any hope of ever getting to a better place die with Hirsch and those lost souls in that tunnel?
Extremely powerful, especially as Chris is, I don't believe he's Jewish, and to hear him invoke a Jewish prayer like this is really a powerful show of support against the selective outrage, support of Israel and the Jewish people in their time of heartache and pain right now. One of the things he talks about is that he sort of thinks the only really way forward is we have to be able to find a way to really be able to see the other and understand the other. And that's the only chance we have of hope. I'm afraid I disagree. My hope absolutely is for peace. But the question is how we get there. So many of the kibbutzim that came under attack, the people who came under attack, were people who deeply believed in extending our arm out to Gazans, to the Palestinians, to the Arabs. And what do you get in return for that? In return for that desperation to want to understand the plight of the other? All we got was betrayal, was a lust for murdering Jews, and an unwillingness to compromise, and a celebration of October 7th. And that's why a lot of people, especially young people in Israel, their views have changed. We've wanted to believe that if we just extend enough compassion to the other side, then things will shift. And what do we get? Not just not a response of compassion, but we've got violence, we've got genocide. And the reason is because the plight of these Arabs is not something that we inflicted. And this is part of our guilt complex that thinks it's somehow our fault. None of the problems that people lament about, that the Arabs have experienced both now and in prior decades since Israel's establishment, are caused by the Jewish people's actions. They are caused by the Arabs' own unwillingness to accept the Jewish people re-establishing sovereignty in their ancient homeland. So of course, they're not going to feel touched when we show compassion for their plight. Their plight is self-inflicted. Before any displacement occurred in 48, there was a proposal to split the land and say, okay, there are Arabs living here, there are Jews living here, so we'll create a Jewish state, an Arab state, no displacement, Jews can live in the Arab state, Arabs can live in the Jewish state, boom, done. Jews said yes, Arabs said no. Time and time again, it's the same old story. See, my concern is actually that going down this same path of keep thinking that somehow if we keep just trying to extend our arm, keep being more compassionate, keeps constantly saying, we'll concede on this, we'll concede on that. It's my concern that if we keep going down that path, then that is what's going to lead to more bloodshed and terror. I just saw a clip, and I'll maybe do it on another video. It was of Shimon Peres in 2005 saying, those who say that our withdrawal from Gaza will lead to a terror state, you are fearmongers, you're bigots, you're all these things, you're just scaring people. Enough with it. The problem is, too many people, including Cuomo here, they want to believe that there's just a legitimate grievance that if you can somehow appease, then there will be peace. But it's not about a legitimate grievance. It really is about hatred. And sometimes in human history, people can just be filled with hate, and there's nothing more to it than that. We saw that in World War II, didn't we? So actually, the only hope for peace moving forward is when Israel has the courage and boldness to say, we're not indulging this notion of a two-state solution anymore, of making concessions, because you've now shown us, having tried this for 100 years, basically, going back to the times of the Peel Commission, you have shown us that you are not interested in sovereignty, you're interested in killing us. And that's all we'd get from a Palestinian state. We get a bigger October 7th, God forbid. And so given that there's no legitimate desire for national self-determination, Israel now has to move forward in saying that the way to peace has to be different from the past. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Now, instead, we have to use the language, which is the only language the region understands. One of uncompromising strength. Which is what they do, by the way. They don't want to compromise. And neither should we. And one thing I just have to touch on before we finish is we posted a graphic on JTV, which I want to post here. War is when they are fighting you and you fight back. Genocide is when they aren't fighting you and you attack them. I think this is so poignant. Israel has never committed genocide. because they are not starting a fight with people. When Israel was declared, it was granted recognition by international bodies in international law. It was approved. Every war that Israel's fought has been one of self-defense. And every war that the Arabs have fought has been one not because Israel was fighting them, but because they want to kill off the Jewish state. Jews can't be equals to them. It goes against their whole theological, political paradigm. So it's so important that we have this moral clarity moving forward. Chris Cuomo has moral clarity in some parts when he sees the selective outrage and the horror of what the other side are doing. But we also need to move out of the paradigm of thinking that somehow more and more compromise, seeing the other, is going to lead to peace. Israel's done a lot of seeing the other. Far too much, actually. And what's it got, Israel? Nowhere. More and more bloodshed. Of course we want peace. Of course we want the other to thrive and do well. But the question is, how is it going to happen? It's not going to happen by making more and more concessions, because all that tells them is, we do feel guilty. Maybe this really is your land. And maybe if you keep pushing us enough, we'll concede even more and more and more. It's not the way forward anymore. And it shocks me that people still think this after October 7th. I know certainly that many people in the South, having faced betrayal of Arabs who worked in their kibbutzim, that they looked after, that they hired, that they gave healthcare to, all these things that betrayed them on that day, they for sure know that a difference of approach is necessary and the time has arrived. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.